Do you remember when a dollar felt heavy in your hand? Not because it weighed anything special, but because of what it could do. A single bill, worn soft at the edges, maybe folded twice the way your mother always folded hers, could walk you into a store and walk you back out with your arms full. That world is gone now, but I think part of you never quite let go of it, and today I want to take you back there. Back to the counters and the corner stores, the butcher's glass case and the five and dime, to remember exactly what a dollar meant when a dollar meant something. Now, before we get into all of it, I want you to hold on to one question as we go, because by the end of this, I think you're going to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Not just nostalgia, but something closer to pride. The kind that comes from remembering how much you knew how to do with so little. So let's go back. All the way back to the 1950s. And let's spend that dollar together. Let's start at the grocery store, because that's where most of the magic happened. The 1950s grocery store was not like anything you walk into today. The floors were linoleum, sometimes cracked near the door. The lights buzzed just barely. And the smell, oh, that smell, sawdust and cold cuts, and something sweet from the bakery section near the back. You knew every person behind the counter by name, and they knew yours. Meat was the first thing your mother went to, not the fancy cuts. Those were for special occasions, for Easter maybe, or when the boss came to dinner. No, on a regular Tuesday she went straight for what stretched, and in the 1950s a dollar stretched meat further than you might believe today. Neck bones were going for about 8 cents a pound. 8 cents. You could buy 12 pounds of neck bones for less than a dollar, and that pot would simmer from 7 in the morning until supper time, filling every room in the house with a smell so deep and warm it was practically a blanket. Nobody called it poor food then, it was just food. Good food. The kind that took time and paid you back for the waiting. Pig's feet were right alongside them, tagged at around 10 cents a pound. A pig's head. And yes, people bought the whole head, brought it home. Made head cheese and broth and crackling could be had for 49 cents. That one purchase fed 6 people across 3 days if your mother knew what she was doing. And she did. They all did. Chicken backs and gizzards were practically given away. A pound of ground beef in 1952 ran about 53 cents. Bologna was 30 cents a pound, and a child who got a bologna sandwich with a thin scrape of mustard on white bread felt like they'd been handed something fine. Let's talk about that white bread for a moment. A loaf of bread in the 1950s cost about 16 cents. 16 cents for a whole loaf that fed a family through the week, and I mean through the week, because nothing was wasted. The heels that nobody wanted to eat fresh got saved. They went into stuffing, into bread pudding, into a bowl of warm milk and sugar that children ate for breakfast without a word of complaint. The heel of bread was not thrown away. That's a sentence that deserves to sit for a second. The heel of bread was not thrown away. Eggs were 19 cents a dozen in 1950. $1 bought you more than 5 dozen eggs. 5 dozen eggs. That's 60 eggs for a dollar, and with 60 eggs you could feed a family breakfast for 2 weeks, bake 2 cakes, make egg salad for Sunday, and still have some left over. Butter was about 63 cents a pound, milk was about 25 cents a half gallon, and a 5-pound bag of flour cost about 49 cents. With $1 and these 3 things together, a woman could bake enough biscuits and gravy to fill a table of 8. Sugar was 49 cents for 5 pounds. Coffee. Real percolated coffee. The kind that dripped slow and smelled like morning itself, ran about 79 cents for a 1-pound can. One can lasted a careful household 3 full weeks. Every morning my grandmother measured those grounds like she was measuring gold. One slightly rounded tablespoon at a time, because she knew exactly how far that can had to go. At the produce stand, a dollar was practically a shopping cart. Apples were 3 pounds for a quarter. Potatoes came in 10-pound bags for 29 cents. 10 pounds of potatoes for 29 cents. You could boil them, fry them, mash them, slice them into a gratin, dice them into a soup. A 10-pound bag of potatoes was a week of side dishes for a family of 5. Onions were 2 pounds for 15 cents. Dried navy beans were about 20 cents a pound, and 1 pound of beans soaked overnight and cooked slow with a ham hock became a pot of soup so thick a spoon stood up in it. Now, here's the thing about all that food. It was not convenience. There were no shortcuts, no cans of cream of mushroom soup standing in for a sauce, no frozen dinners sliding out of a box. Everything took hands and time, and a certain kind of attention that we have almost entirely lost. And yet, and here's the part that matters, the people who cooked it did not feel burdened by it. They felt capable. Every woman who could stretch $1's worth of chicken backs into Sunday dinner for 7 people was carrying a kind of knowledge that took years to learn and was passed down like an heirloom, not in a cookbook, across a kitchen counter, by watching. Let's move away from the grocery store now and talk about some of the other things a dollar touched in the 1950s, because it wasn't just food, it was the whole texture of daily life. At the 5 and dime, the Woolworths or the ASS, Kresge, depending on your town, $1 was an adventure. Woolworths smelled like popcorn and rubber and new plastic. The counters were long and low and crammed with things that cost a nickel or a dime. A spool of good thread was 5 cents. A packet of sewing needles, 10 cents. Bobby pins came in a little cardboard sleeve for a nickel. A child could walk into Woolworths with a quarter and walk out with a small bag of penny candy, a jack set, a coloring book, and still have change. A whole afternoon's worth of happiness for coins. For adults, $1 at the 5 and dime went just as far. Dish towels, 2 for 15 cents. A bar of Ivory soap. 8 cents a box of 24 crayons for a child's school kit, 25 cents. A tube of Tangy lipstick. The one that went on clear and turned pink on your lips was 29 cents. Face powder was 39 cents. A small bottle of Evening in Paris perfume in that dark blue glass bottle was 50 cents. And if a man gave his wife one of those on her birthday, she kept the bottle on her dresser long after it was empty, because it was beautiful and it was hers. Movies. Oh, let's talk about the movies. A ticket to the picture show in the early 1950s was about 50 cents for an adult, and sometimes less on a weekday matinee. Children got in for a quarter. For $1, a couple could go to the movies together. Sit in the dark, watch something with Cary Grant or Doris Day, share a bag of popcorn, and have enough left for a soda at the fountain on the way home. That was a date, a real date, and people dressed for it. You didn't walk into a movie theater in the 1950s in what you'd slept in the night before. You wore your good clothes because it mattered, because you were going somewhere. The soda fountain deserves its own moment. In the 1950s, every pharmacy worth its salt had one. A counter with spinning stools, a mirror behind it, a young man in a paper hat who could build a banana split like he was constructing something important. A fountain Coke was a nickel, a milkshake thick, real ice cream blended with real milk was 20 cents. A banana split, the full extravagance of it, was 35 cents. You could walk in with 50 cents and sit at that counter and feel like the world was a generous place. Now, I want to tell you something that I think about whenever I think about the 1950s and money, and I want you to really hear it. The average working man in the United States in 1950 made somewhere around $3,000 a year. That sounds like almost nothing now, but the math looked different then. A 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood cost about $9,000, which meant 3 years of full salary. Not impossible, not crushing. Today, the equivalent calculation would stop most families before it started. The dollar then was not just worth more in number. It was worth more in proportion. It bought a life, a full one, and yet here's what I want you to hold. Those families were not sloppy with their money. They were careful. Not out of fear exactly, though there was some of that too. The shadow of the Depression never fully lifted from people who'd lived through it. They were careful because they had learned the hard way that everything could change, that the job could go, that the crop could fail, that you'd better know how to feed your family on what was left in the cupboard because there might not be another trip to the store this week. So when a woman bought neck bones for 8 cents a pound, she wasn't settling. She was choosing the things she knew how to make magnificent. She was reaching for the cut of meat that nobody else wanted and turning it into the meal her children asked for by name. That is not poverty thinking. That is mastery. Let's talk about the home for a moment. Because $1 touched the house too, not just the table. In the 1950s, a gallon of paint at the hardware store was about $3.50, but a quart, which could freshen up a single room in a small house, was under $1. Families painted their own rooms. The father did it on a Saturday, moving the furniture to the middle, rolling white or pale yellow or the pale green that seemed to be in every kitchen in America over every wall, and by Sunday it was dry and the room felt new. That was the renovation. That was enough. A pound of nails at the hardware store was 15 cents. A good box of wooden matches was a dime. A roll of wax paper was 19 cents. Aluminum foil, still a relative novelty in the early 50s, was about 39 cents for a roll that you folded back carefully and used again because you didn't waste it. Wax paper was used to wrap the school lunches that went into paper bags, not plastic bags, not reusable pouches with little cartoon characters on them. Paper bags that sometimes had the child's name written on them in pencil, big careful letters, so nobody took the wrong one. I want to stop here for a moment right in the middle of all of this and ask you something. Do you remember what it felt like to have exactly enough? Not plenty, not more than enough, just exactly enough, where every purchase was considered, where the question was not which brand but whether, where the act of buying something small, a candy bar, a new pair of stockings, a packet of flower seeds for the front yard, felt like a small celebration. I think that feeling is something this generation carried and something the generations that came after never quite understood, because when everything is available all the time, nothing feels like a gift. Back to the store. Let's talk about what a dollar bought at the pharmacy, because the drugstore in the 1950s was its own world. Aspirin, a tin of Bayer aspirin, 100 tablets, was 39 cents. A bottle of castor oil was 19 cents. Mercurochrome, that red antiseptic that went on every scraped knee from Maine to California, was 25 cents. Vicks Vapor Rub was 39 cents, and in every house with children there was a jar of it in the medicine cabinet because it was the answer to everything. A cough, a chest cold, a stuffy nose, even rubbed on the soles of feet at night by grandmothers who swore by it. Cough syrup was 35 cents. A box of Band-Aids was 20 cents. For $1 at the pharmacy, a mother could stock a medicine cabinet that covered her family through most of the ordinary sicknesses a year could bring. No copays, no prior authorizations, no driving 40 minutes to a specialist. You called Dr. Henderson if it was serious, and sometimes he came to the house, and his visit cost $3, which felt steep but which you paid because that was what it cost, and you figured out the rest later. At the gas station in 1950, a gallon of gasoline was about 27 cents. $1 filled almost 4 gallons. The family car, a 1952 Chevrolet Styline, say, or a Ford Custom, got about 15 miles to the gallon. 4 gallons took you 60 miles on $1. A Sunday drive out into the country, past farms and silos, and the kind of open space that made children press their faces against the windows, cost almost nothing. That was the point. You didn't have to spend money to have somewhere to go, you just went. Let me tell you about the hardware store one more time, because there's something there I haven't said yet. In the 1950s, the hardware store was where men went the way women went to the fabric store. Not to browse exactly, but to think, to stand in front of a wall of screws or hinges or lengths of chain and work something out. Things were fixed in the 1950s, not replaced. Fixed a toaster that stopped working went to the repair shop. A shoe with a worn heel went to the cobbler. A coat with a broken zipper had the zipper replaced, not the coat. The word disposable hadn't yet attached itself to the way people thought about their possessions. You bought a thing, it was yours, and you kept it going. A replacement window pane for a broken window was about 30 cents for a small one. A wooden dowel was a nickel. Sandpaper came in sheets for 3 cents each. A good strong hinge was 8 cents. These were not glamorous purchases. They were the purchases of people who intended to maintain their world rather than replace it. There's a kind of quiet dignity in that, a patience. Now, I've been thinking about something since we started today, and I want to come back to it. I said at the beginning that by the end of this you'd feel something closer to pride than to sadness, and I meant that. Because here's what the 1950s dollar really tells us, if we're willing to listen to it. It tells us that the people who lived through those years, your parents, your grandparents, maybe you yourself, were operating at a level of practical intelligence that has almost no equivalent today. The woman who walked into a grocery store with $4 and walked out with enough food to feed 6 people for a week was not just being thrifty. She was executing. She knew the price of everything in that store. She knew what stretched and what didn't. She knew that a whole chicken cut up herself at home cost less and went further than any cut sold separately. She knew the difference between a soup bone and a soup stock and a finished soup, and she could move between all three with one pot and one afternoon. The man who painted his own walls, fixed his own porch steps, patched his own roof on a Saturday, rewired a lamp with a kit from the hardware store, and still had dinner on the table at 6, not because he was remarkable, but because that was simply what a person did. That man carried a competence we have largely outsourced. We pay people now to do the things those men did by default. We pay people to do the things those women did without thinking of it as a skill, because it was just life. Let me give you a few last numbers, because I want you to feel the full weight of what a dollar was. A first-class postage stamp in 1952 was 3 cents, 3 cents. You could send 33 letters for $1, 33 handwritten letters, sealed and stamped and mailed to the people you loved, for $1. A telegram, if you needed to get word somewhere fast, was about 65 cents for 10 words. A long-distance phone call was expensive enough that people saved them for emergencies, but a local call from a payphone was a nickel. A haircut for a man was about 75 cents at the barber shop. A shampoo and set for a woman at the beauty parlor was about $1.25, which meant she went once a week if she could and stretched it to 10 days if she had to, sleeping on a satin pillowcase to hold the curl. A child's haircut was 35 cents. A shoe shine at the stand outside the department store was 10 cents, 15 if you tipped, and the man who did it took pride in the shine he left behind, buffing the toe until you could see your reflection in it. The department store itself, Sears, Montgomery Ward, JCPenney, was a world you could spend a whole Saturday in. A man's dress shirt was about $2.49. A woman's cotton house dress was $1.98. A child's pair of leather shoes, the kind with the buckle on the side and the stiff toe that took 2 weeks to break in, was about $3. These were not cheap, and families planned for them. The Sears catalog came in the fall and the spring, and children circled things in it with a pencil, knowing that most of what they circled they would not get, but enjoying the dreaming of it. $1 at Sears could buy you a dish towel set, a package of men's undershirts, a pair of work gloves, a canister of shoe polish, a pair of children's ankle socks, or a pattern for a dress you'd sew yourself from fabric bought at 39 cents a yard. Sewing your own clothes was not a hobby in the 1950s. It was a household skill as basic as cooking, passed from mother to daughter the same way a soup recipe was, not written down, just demonstrated, the hands teaching the hands. I want to end where we started, at the kitchen table, because that's where most of this really lived. The 1950s kitchen was not a showplace, it was a workshop. The linoleum floor wore through in front of the sink because that's where the woman of the house stood for hours every day. The dish towels were often cut from flour sacks, hemmed by hand, and washed until they were so soft they felt like a whisper. The refrigerator, if the family had one, and not everyone did in the early years of the decade, hummed steadily and was never packed full, because you bought what you needed when you needed it and not more. The table itself was where the accounting happened. Not in a ledger usually, in a woman's head. She knew without writing it down what the milk cost, what the bread cost, what she'd spent at the butcher, and what she still needed for the week. She carried the household budget the way a navigator carries a course, not on paper, in her body, in her knowing, and she balanced it. Week after week she balanced it, on a salary that left almost no room for error, and with a dignity that asked for no applause. Do you remember that? The way your mother or your grandmother seemed to know, without being told exactly how much was left and exactly what it would do. That knowledge was not given to them. They earned it. They built it, one careful purchase at a time, one pot of neck bones, one loaf of bread, one quart of paint on a Saturday, one postage stamp carefully licked and pressed into place on an envelope going somewhere that mattered. That dollar, worn soft at the edges, folded twice, did not just buy things. It carried a whole way of being in the world, a way that said, I know what this costs, I know what it's worth, I know how to make it enough, and you know it too. You lived it. And that knowing, that particular hard-won, beautiful knowing, is yours. Nobody can take it from you. Not inflation, not time, not a world that forgot how to be careful with what it has, you remember, and that's everything.